Cowardice asks, the question, is it safe? Expediency asks, the question, is it politic? Vanity asks, the question, is it popular? But conscience asks, the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because conscience tells him it is right.
Every time our country stands in the path of danger, an instinct seems to summon her finest first, those who truly understand her. When freedom shivers in the cold shadow of true peril, it's always the patriots who first hear the call. When loss of liberty is looming, as it is now, the siren sounds first in the hearts of freedom's vanguard.
Fighting for humanity and against globalism, one mind at a time. It's the Freedom Link with Joe Joseph.
Welcome, everybody. It's another great edition of the Freedom Link here, 25th of March, 2023. The Great Waco rally underway. That's right. Trump, in his infinite wisdom, Scotty, has decided that why not just have a his first campaign rally of the 2024 presidential cycle in Waco.
But Joe, I thought he was supposed to be arrested. I thought
That's
they were supposed to slap. I thought they were supposed to slap those cuffs on him and haul him in. You know, hey.
Patience, Padawan. He's not out of the woods yet. I'm telling you right now, my man. He's you have to understand it's political theater has really kind of made a comeback since the repeal of the Smith-Mundt Act and the ability to really pump in propaganda and social engineering in ways that, quite frankly, weren't legal for a very long time. So that's part of it. But, you know, quite frankly, he's just as capable, and he's proven it time and time again, where he's willing to do something very, shall we say, edgy to garner attention. It's really just that simple. If you remember back when he was a lot younger, he was really into boxing, back when he had his casino in New Jersey. And he spent a lot of time there, and you'd always see him down there, and it was always, you know, trying to be the tough guy, that kind of thing, and always having that kind of mafioso, quasi Godfather-like presence, very similar to his father, Fred. So it is what it is. All I can say is it's pretty evident that things are deteriorating. Why they're deteriorating, the entangling alliances that are making it deteriorate even faster. A lot of people vilified Trump, and let us just be clear that Scotty and I both are not exactly jumping up and down Trump freaks, you know, like wee Trump and all that, and wearing the red, white, and blue and all that. We don't kind of roll like that. But I will say that the alliances with Ukraine and China put any sort of alliance that Trump might have had with Putin to shame. You know, I mean, like if we remember the dossier, Scotty, they all made a big stink about that when this guy was president. But you have evidence to show that this guy was selling, just like the Clintons and the Clinton Global Initiative and all that stuff, selling access to Chinese and Ukrainian oligarchs, you know, through family members. I think it puts the whole dossier to shame, dude.
Right, and I mean, and besides, I mean, the dossier was totally fake, anyways, right? So,
right.
but right, I mean, you have all of these shady business deals going on with, was it Burisma, you know, the Ukrainian oil company and all of that. And like I had said on the show before, right, you know, what skeletons are hiding in the Ukrainian closet, right?
Oof.
And I think that this is why they're really trying to draw this thing out and keep Putin out of there, because I mean, once the KGB gets in there and starts rummaging through papers and documents, and
it's funny you bring that up, but history also says that that's happened before, and it's happened before at the end of World War II, the race to Berlin. If you remember, it was a race of the Allies, or basically the United States versus Russia, to get there first, to kind of plant their flag and dictate how that was going to be rehabilitated, who was going to have the greater share of control over Germany. But and they all knew why, because the Germans were so far advanced and had done so much research into, quite frankly, crazy shit that people today would be like, you know, in our hyper-aware, safety-conscious world, I would be floored if we did some of the things that the Germans did from the, early 1930s on to the end of World War II. I would be absolutely floored, Scotty. I mean, well, I'll get into that later as far as like safety. And there's a reason why I bring that up. And I'm not bringing it up because of, like the doomsday freaks that are about, peace and safety. No, not like that. No, I'm talking about industrial safety. And I'm talking about like what corporations are doing now to not only dumb people down, but also put people at risk, all in the name of safety. It's really terrible. We'll get into that too, because it is having a very negative effect on society. And I think that the explosion at the R.M. Palmer factory in Pennsylvania, anybody that does the holidays, like Easter and everybody, then R.M. Palmer, because they're the ones.
I heard about this explosion. I didn't look too much into it, but I heard that there was a huge.
I got the clip.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll explain what I think it is, and then we can get into that. But there's a clear problem in industry in the United States, and I see a trend, and it's not good, and it does not help, and the metrics don't support it. So we'll get into that too. And then also, there is, of course, a push to censor, even though all of that has been exposed, with Elon buying Twitter and the Twitter files coming out. But all that aside, there's still some pretty scary plans, I would say, to censor American speech. And I know a lot of people say, well, gosh, America, the whole land of the free. This is where we have to really come to grips with language and why it is they say what they say, but it's really not true. It's like the sky is green, right? It's blue. No, the sky is green. Say it. That's, and just to fit in, people will say, well, the sky is green. And then finally, getting back to our roots, of course, and we'll get into some serious science tonight and some of the latest technologies, as well as how that could be tying into possibly, like the Akashic records and things like that. Oh, yeah. So
nice.
Yeah, I think this is good. The first thing I want to start is with a little history. And history has a way of really making people look stupid in the long run, especially government, Scotty. Government's a real issue because everybody that gets into government does so with the I know what's best for you mentality, right? That I can go in and I know what's best for you. I know how to spend your money and I know how to make your life better. And one of the ways they do that is the war on drugs. Prohibition, we know, does not work. Hasn't worked. And hasn't worked for a very long time. Oh, never. It's never worked. See, humans don't work like that. And people don't understand that you can think you have the solution to immortality. Not everybody's going to sign up for it. Not everybody's going to think immortality is a great idea, right? And you're going to piss a lot of people off if you try to force immortality on. I'm one of them. Immortality doesn't come in a flesh suit. Boo, boo. I don't want it. You know? Could you imagine, Scotty? Imagine, right? Okay, Scotty, right now, grant you immortality. I can't fix what ails you. Okay? Not right now. But don't worry, you're immortal. One of these days, they're going to figure it out. Until then, you're not going to die. Enjoy your life.
Nah, no bueno. Nah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what do you just lay around in your own broken flesh suit until they figure out how to, down the road, if they ever figure out how to fix it or whatever,
No, I mean, there's some people that really want to live forever. They do. To the point where, they are harvesting teenage blood and youthful blood and doing transfusions because science has shown that does have a restorative effect. Or even a regenerative effect. Why not?
What is it? You have that company, was it Ambrosia, where they have
Ambrosia. That's right. Let's have a glass of blood. Blah, blah, blah,
Or they have these old rich codgers come in there and they hook themselves up to a they do a blood transfusion with like a younger person or whatever. It's crazy,
Now I'm in no way saying that Henry Kissinger is a customer of that or partakes of it at all, but I'm just going to do like an analysis real quick. Okay. Now he turned into like a round, like Pizza the Hut almost, right? Kind of with a frog voice,
right.
But like 10 years ago, the guy is smart as a whip, hasn't lost a step mentally, right? But his body liquefied like 10 years ago into this round lump.
This is also
he's still kicking it, putting out books, doing things, writing articles. So,
right.
He's active, still like 100 years old.
This is also where you get into that whole transhumanist sort of thing where they want to extend their, maybe they don't have to deal with their flesh suit anymore. They can transplant their consciousness into a computer or preserve.
Like a stack. Remember that, like the stacks? What was it?
Right.
The Black Mirror was that? I can't remember what it was, but where they transferred their consciousness via the stack in their neck.
Right, transplant their brain or at least copy their brain or something into some form. That's kind of the direction I see a lot of this going as well. If you can't keep the flesh alive, try to keep the brain and the consciousness going for as long as possible. I mean, it's crazy,
that's right.
Dude.
Yeah, maybe it's akin to the same thing like people freezing their heads. Back in the 50s and 60s, right? Or like they say, what was it? John Wayne and Walt Disney and others that, they freeze their heads and the off chance that they get to live. Ted Williams was another one, I think. The last guy to bat 400 in Major League Baseball. Still,
They're like, hey guys, we figured it out. Pull their head out, throw it in the microwave.
What are we gonna do? Find an ass to put them in. I don't know. Where are we gonna put them? Maybe they'll thaw off there. Yeah. And while they're thawing, because it's gonna take about 50 years to thaw it.
Make sure you set the microwave on dethaw. Don't.
Man. Yeah. Not 100%. Gosh, you're gonna cook them. Yeah. So seriously, so it's down that vein. So right. I wanna play this clip first because first of all, Liberty Pen, great channel. If you like anything that has to do with historical, liberty-focused type of content, it's a really great channel to get your feet wet with some of these voices from the past. Very good guy is Milton Friedman, and I'm going to share that with you now. And this is the first clip of his where he talks about the war on drugs. This is this is later on, like 1990s or so, right before, I think he died like 2005-ish, in and around there. But he was such just a brilliant guy. So without further ado, let's see. Here he is right here. Why drugs should be legalized. This is a very interesting take that you won't find or hear anywhere else.
During Prohibition, when I was a teenager, Prohibition was repealed in 1933 when I was 21 years old. So I was a teenager during most of Prohibition. Alcohol was readily available. Bootlegging was common. Any idea that alcohol prohibition was keeping people from drinking was absurd. There were speakeasies all over the place, but more than that. We had this spectacle of Al Capone, of the hijackings and the gang wars. Anybody with two eyes to see could see that this was a bad deal, that you were doing more harm than good. Now, in addition, I became an economist. And as an economist, I came to recognize the importance of markets and of free choice and of consumer sovereignty, and came to discover the harm that was done when you interfered with it. The effect of criminalization, of making drugs criminal, is to drive people from mild drugs to strong drugs.
In what way?
Well, take marijuana. Marijuana is a very heavy, bulky substance, and therefore it's relatively easy to interdict. The warriors on drugs have been more successful in interdicting marijuana than, let's say, cocaine. So marijuana prices have gone up. They've become harder to get. There's been an incentive to grow more potent marijuana, and people have been driven from marijuana to heroin or cocaine or one of the other, or crack, one of the other drugs.
Let us consider another drug then, and that is the drug crack, crack cocaine.
Crack would never have existed, in my opinion, if you had not had drug prohibition. It was drug prohibition. Well, why was crack created? Because cocaine was so expensive. I see America with half the number of prisons, half the number of prisoners, 10,000 fewer homicides a year, inner cities in which there's a chance for these poor people to live without being afraid for their lives, respectable citizens who are now citizens who might be respectable who are now addicts, not being subject to becoming criminals in order to get their drug, being able to get drugs for which they're sure of the quality. The role of the government is to protect the drug cartel. That's literally true.
Is it doing a good job with it?
Excellent. What do I mean by that? In an ordinary free market business, let's take potatoes, beef, anything you want. There are thousands of importers and exporters. Anybody can go into the business. But but it's very hard for a small person to go into the drug importing business because our interdiction efforts essentially make it enormously costly. So the only people who can survive in that business are these large meddling cartel kind of people who have enough money so they can have fleets of airplanes, so they can have sophisticated methods, so on. So in effect, in addition to which, by keeping goods out, by arresting, let's say, local marijuana growers, the government keeps the price of these products high. So what more could a monopolist want? The one negative feature of legalizing drugs is that there might be some additional drug addicts. However, I want to qualify that in still another way. The child who's shot in a slum in a pass-by shooting, in a random shooting, is an innocent victim in every respect of the term. The person who decides to take drugs for himself is not an innocent victim. He has chosen himself to be a victim. And I must say, I have very much less sympathy for him. I am not willing to impose, I do not think it is moral to impose heavy costs on other people to protect people from their own choices.
Is it not true that the entire discussion here, the entire drug problem, is an economic problem?
No, it's not an economic problem at all. It's a moral problem.
In what way?
The economics part of it is, I'm an economist, but the economics problem is strictly tertiary. It's a moral problem. It's a problem of the harm which government is doing. Look, I have estimated statistically that the prohibition of drugs produces, on the average, 10,000 additional homicides a year. It's a moral problem that the government is going around killing 10,000 people. It's a moral problem that the government is making into criminals people who may be doing something you and I don't approve of, but who are doing something that hurts nobody else. Most of the arrests for drugs are for possession by casual users. Now, here's somebody who wants to smoke a cigarette, joint, marijuana cigarette. If he's caught, he goes to jail. Now, is that moral? Is that proper? I think it's absolutely disgraceful that our government, supposed to be our government, should be in the position of converting people who are not harming others into criminals, of destroying their life, putting them in jail. I don't see, that's the issue to me. Look, if you're right, the case for prohibiting drugs is exactly as strong and as weak as a case for prohibiting people from overeating. We all know that overeating causes more deaths than drugs do. Why isn't it perfect if it's in principle okay for the government to say you must not consume drugs because they do you harm? Why isn't it all right to say you must not eat too much because you harm? Why isn't it all right to say you must not try to go in for skydiving because you're likely to die? Why isn't it all right to say, oh, skiing, that's no good. That's a very dangerous sport. You'll hurt yourself. Where do you draw the line?
So where do you draw the line? That's the question. And apparently, we're now starting to see the fruit of government intervention. What happens when government or people think they know what's best for others? It's happening, and it's not just drugs, right? It's not just drugs. Look at the fentanyl crisis going on in the streets, right? It's not prescription fentanyl. It's not pharmaceutical grade fentanyl. No, it is the bad stuff. And it's lacing everything. Now, had they not gone through prohibition of opium and people were allowed to and had a safe place to go do that or bring it home or do whatever, and that goes for anything else, we wouldn't have had these synthetics even thought of. Wouldn't have been a thought.
Another good example is with marijuana, right? Because of the prohibition of marijuana, you all of a sudden had these synthetics pop up like K2 and Spice and all of these.
Right.
Essentially,
not to mention the fact that you had people doing bigger and stronger strains and different hybrids and all that stuff because you wanted to get it as strong as you possibly could. So a little goes a long way because it's illegal and you're taking a great risk in shipping it, like Milton said, because it is a bulky substance that's easy to interdict.
And the real, the danger with all of that, I mean, the real dangerous thing is that, you have these people, or even, teenagers or whatever, thinking that they're getting some kind of a marijuana alternative, right? When it's really just
Right.
herbs sprayed with chemicals, and
Right.
they don't realize that. And essentially they're smoking bath salts that are just sprinkled on to some, like catnip or something like that, right?
Yep.
And you saw the huge problem that caused, people freaking out, people going into, was it like hyper delirious states, going, doing the whole bath salt zombie thing, and freaking out, when that never would have happened. It never would have happened if
That's right.
there wasn't prohibition on marijuana.
Prohibition always makes the matter worse, no matter
Right.
what. And it's so true. If you make that illegal, then you are just as justified. Like they said, go by the numbers. What's the leading cause of death? Suicide's even coming up. Why? Because of stress. Well, now let's make stress illegal. That's what I'm talking about. You want to do that? I'm throwing the stress card out. No, bills, F you. We don't have to pay them. That's stressful.
Oh, and then you know what? Oh, how do people want to deal with their stress? Oh, maybe I want to smoke a joint. Oh, I can't because I might get her. Oh, so right.
See, eventually what ends up happening is you have so much control. The control state is just so heavy that whenever the old saying goes, when everything's illegal, nothing's illegal.
Right.
People just stop. They hit that point where they're just like, nope. I don't care. I'm not doing it like this anymore. I can't. And they're absolutely justified. We're there in so many different ways. If you think about society, we were talking a little bit before the show about just how crazy the world's getting in so many different ways, whether you talk about the acceleration of technology, Scotty, or even the many hysterias that have now developed, that have polarized not just our country, but the entire Western world. And you could even say the world for that matter, because if you look within countries, everybody's polarized, and it's really because of that overarching control grid and state that's just, it's suffocating everybody, and we're short circuiting. It's terrible,
Right. And how much of it do you think also has to do with the fact that now the world is so interconnected, that we're all able to have access to the same internet, or, and that a lot of the things that may have, once upon a time happened maybe locally within a country, but then, maybe other countries didn't realize what was going on within that country, but now everything is so interconnected on a global scale.
More
that
people are aware.
Yeah,
than ever before.
like you said, it's a double-edged sword, because
it is.
At one, on one side, everybody across the globe has access to the same information and can wake up to the same same things and stuff, but they can also be propagandized and polarized with the same information, and that can happen on a global scale as well. So
absolutely it does. And it is.
Right.
Think about this just for a second. Okay, we have a president of the United States that is in cahoots with China more than you can ever possibly know. And I don't say that because I don't like to play the politics thing, right? As far as left, right, I don't care. I am agnostic when it comes to political parties and things like that. But the very control grid that was beta tested in China is being deployed now all over the world. But it all started there. And everybody sent that stuff over there, that technology over there, to be proved out. Some of that technology, do you think China made it? No. There were American engineers and American companies that did it. Apple, big partnership with China.
I was about to say, you really think that Apple and Google and all of these big tech companies were doing business in China just because there was cheaper labor there. No. There was
then the second
more
thing
to
too
it.
is, don't fool yourself into thinking that these wars are justified in any way. And if you do, then I would humbly ask you to please take the time to read the 90 pages that is War is a Racket by Smedley Butler, and understand how these wars they come about and what they're for. And what these guys are doing right now is just like Scotty said, buying time. They're buying time because they know Russia's playing they're playing a kind of like playing a card. It's their play. They went in, they invaded, right? But they knew what was going on in there, and they knew it was happening right on their border. And if you take a look at American foreign policy, we surround China and we surround Russia. We just do. We have bases all around them. We surround them in so many different ways. And if it's not us, it's our allies. So, I mean, they are smothered, right? Absolutely smothered. You look at us, how would we feel if off the maybe 50 miles off of every state, right? There's a Chinese and Russian base or something like that. Now, me, I really don't give a crap because 99.9% of people just want to get along and, have their families and live their lives. But it's these control freaks that do all this stuff and then propagandize it and get people to buy into it, but also there's power in the crowd. And so you want people to be together in a crowd because they'll do things that they normally wouldn't do as an individual. That's just that true. You get courage, you get strength, you get that oomph when you're with a crowd because
you get mob mentality.
Mentality. Yeah.
Right.
And so they know that people, they gain confidence, they gain power. So that's how they do it. They use the crowd as a central way to really, really get this stuff going and to get their propaganda out and spread. So and accountability too. There's really no accountability in a crowd because it's a crowd, You how do you just blame one person? You really can't. So with that said, it's important that we understand that this country, specifically the United States, the Great Experiment, was all about self-interest, about self-preservation, about self-ownership. And rights are derived from that very thing. And you can't have rights if you're part of the crowd. No different than there's accountability or anything else. It all goes away. And that's what they want. They want that to go away. They're working on that to go away. That's what the Great Reset's all about.
They want you to be part all about. Right. They want you to be part of the collective, right? And
that's right.
And
so,
yeah.
So I want to play the second clip of our voice in history, Milton Friedman, tonight, because it's very important that you understand why that's so important and why it's pivotal, no matter what your political leanings are. That is secondary to this. And I'm going to show you because you basically have that type of polarization going on in this conversation coming up. And again, I can't thank Liberty Pen enough for having these gems. Just unbelievable stuff. You go to Liberty Pen and subscribe. He's got so much content on his channel of this this kind of stuff, of the liberty-minded type of stuff that you see. I mean, it's great. So here he is. This is Milton Friedman on the Phil Donahue Show, circa 1978.
Please welcome the Nobel laureate in economics, Milton Friedman, right there. Tell us how we're going to get automobile dealers who really care about servicing the car as much as they care about selling us the car. Tell us how we're going to get automobile dealers who sell us safety with the same vigor that they sell us cosmetics.
Well, if the public at large really wanted to buy safety rather than cosmetics, it would be in the self-interest of the automobile dealers to sell them safety. You have had some automobile companies that have concentrated on selling safety, and they have not done very well in the sales. You can't blame. Here you have, let me give you a very simple example. You have the so-called Superba car, which is built by the Checker company that produces Checker cabs. They emphasize safety. It's the safest car probably there is built in America. They haven't been able to sell very many. If the problem with your talk is that you're not talking in terms of what the consumer really wants as judged by what he's willing to pay for. You're talking in terms of what you think he ought to want.
I am also talking, okay, so the underpinning here, underneath your statement here is the stupid public want Landau tops and colors and they put blue lights on these cars in the showrooms and everybody says, yeah, I want one of those, like Pavlov's dog.
I'm not going to call them stupid. The public is entitled to buy what it wants to buy. Who am I to say whether those tastes are better or worse than my taste?
What's your conclusion on a person who's more interested in the style of a car than whether or not the baby's protected after the collision? Well, that's stupid.
I think he has every right to pursue his own objectives and his own tastes, and I have every right to try to persuade him he's wrong. Okay. But if I can't persuade him, do I have the right to force him? Now, you don't bring in the baby, because that raises another and an extraneous and very difficult issue. Because I will agree with you, he does not have the right
to put a baby like an egg in a crate.
That's right. That's a different question. The third-party effect is different.
I trust you wouldn't pass a law to oblige babies to be constrained in cars.
No, I probably would not. But I think that
You're not very comfortable in saying no to the question.
No, I'm comfortable. But what I would do is I would say that any parent parent ought to be subject to suit and to being sent to jail if a child has been damaged because of that parent's
Right. Are you willing to pay for the prosecutor that it's going to take to develop the evidence that the mother didn't place the baby properly in the car and the bureaucracy that will accompany the enforcement of the law, which says that you can go to jail if you don't?
Unfortunately, I have to pay for it. I'm not, as I say,
so there are limits to your free society.
I'm not an anarchist.
Okay.
I believe that government has a very important role, but it's a limited role.
Okay.
And because we've been trying to extend the role, we haven't been doing what government ought to do as well as it does, as it should. We've been doing a terrible job on what ought to be the first function of government. The first function of government is to protect the nation against foreign enemies and to protect individual citizens against assault by their fellow citizens. And we've been doing a terrible job on both ends.
And in that goal, you are aligned with John Stuart Mill.
Absolutely.
Not bad company, and I want to show you what I've taken out of your book. You've quoted Mill in.
Good. I'm glad to see you've read to page
I've
3.
Tried page 2, Doc. All right, let's. He's tough. This is a long hour, I'll tell you. Okay, here it is, John Stuart. The sole end for which mankind are warranted. This looks grammatically incorrect, but stay with us. Individually or collectively, in interfering with the liberty of action of any of their number is self-protection. The only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others. The only part of the conduct of anyone, his own good, either physical or moral, is not a sufficient warrant. In other words, let's understand that. For my own good, the government cannot pass what would be called forcible action. In other words, here's a way. A person ought to be able to kill themselves. If they want.
The right to commit suicide is a natural human right.
It's your life.
It's your life. Now,
and you don't want the government to spend any money to prevent you from doing that.
Absolutely not. Now, I am obviously, I as a friend of yours will try to prevent you. If you were a friend of mine and you suddenly got to a bridge and were going to jump over, I would certainly rush over and grab you and pull you up.
But you don't want public money to keep me from doing it.
Well, I would go farther. No, I want to go farther on a personal basis. I would reason with you. I would argue with you. But let's suppose after I had reasoned with you, after I had argued with you, I had failed to persuade you. Do I have the right to use force to prevent you from disposing of your own life? The clearest case of that, I certainly do not. I certainly do not. And you do not. And certainly, you do not have the right to put your hands in the pockets of other people in order to prevent somebody from doing something in his own value system.
I assume then that if somebody wants to smoke marijuana, that's their business too.
That's his business, absolutely.
Are we going to take that to heroin and addiction?
Absolutely. Now, let me go back on that one, because that's a very interesting thing. Even if on ethical principles, you believe it is right to prevent somebody else from smoking heroin, as a matter of expediency, it's a terrible mistake. The largest...
So is jumping off the bridge.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, it's a terrible mistake for society to render heroin illegal, because that increases the harm which heroin does. Why do we have so much crime in the inner cities and in the cities? Over 50% of it is attributed to crime for the sake of acquiring money to buy heroin.
Because
why is heroin so expensive? Because it's illegal. We went through this with prohibition. Whether you believe it's right or wrong to prevent people from drinking alcohol, we had the experience with prohibition in which we found that it did more harm than good.
And a lot of guys got shot in the garage.
A lot of guys got shot, and the more important, the basic respect for law was eroded. Law-abiding people who would never ordinarily have broken the law broke the law in order to get a drink.
Because they knew that the law enforcement agencies could not possibly enforce with any efficiency the laws against the prohibition law.
But the reason they couldn't enforce it was because it wasn't publicly backed. If the 90% of the public had been in favor of the prohibition law, you could have enforced it.
But I'm promising you 90% of the public right now is in favor of enforcing prohibition against heroin.
And you cannot enforce it. I agree. I was understating my case. Even with 90% of the people, you can't enforce it. And it does vastly more harm today because it is illegal than it would do if it were legal. Let me point out for a moment that more lives are lost each year through drinking alcohol than through heroin.
But
if there's a case, if you're going to make the case for preventing heroin on the basis of saving lives, there's a much stronger case for prohibition of alcohol.
But there would be some who would argue that to relax law enforcement or to take away law enforcement pressure on heroin trade is to ensure that heroin deaths will meet and exceed alcohol deaths.
On the contrary, it would reduce the number of heroin deaths. Why would it reduce the number of heroin deaths? In the first place, many of the deaths come from impure or adulterated heroin or needles that are contaminated. In the second place, as we found in Prohibition, the fact of Prohibition encouraged alcoholism rather than the opposite. To the young people in particular, it became an adventure to go out and get drunk, to go to a speakeasy. Today, with heroin illegal, it pays a heroin pusher to create an addict. Because given that it's illegal, it's worth his while to spend some money on getting somebody else hooked. Because once hooked, he has a captive audience.
I assume, like the baby in the car, you would support legislation prohibiting the sale of heroin and other addictive substances to juveniles.
Well, that's a very hard question. I think there is a different case for juveniles. But whether you could really handle the question, that's a question of expediency, not a principle. If I thought I could enforce it, I would be willing to say that for juveniles. But I'm not sure I could enforce it, and I'm not sure when I looked into it, I wouldn't decide I did more harm than good even there.
So there you have it. I mean, that is as black and white as you could possibly make it. I really admire Milton Friedman. He was a fellow at the Hoover Institute and just an unbelievable resource. And he was good enough to document a lot of his stuff. And he did a lot of speeches. An unbelievable thing, Scotty. He and gosh, what was his name? He ran for the Green Party too. He was big into the car safety at the time. His name just escaped me, but he and Milton Friedman would go back and forth all the time about car safety. And it's just like, look, if people wanted car safety, they would ask for it and buy it. Yeah, Ralph Nader. Thank you, Joe Fox. Ralph Nader. And it was just an amazing thing. And oftentimes Phil Donahue, who would have him on, and actually they'd go head to head and have some wonderful debates. So it's something else, but it's true, Scotty. So take into account our current circumstances. Now you've just heard a voice in history, a very knowledgeable one that saw what was going on in the 70s and saw where it would lead if it was continued or if it continued to flourish like it has.
Right.
So now you have the banks. Now the banks are coming up. And to our detriment, they've been bailed out time and time and time again. And you're told that it has to happen. That
Too big to fail, Joe. Too big
to fail. That's a great, yes, of course. So Activist Post has the latest Michael Snyder piece that I want to share with folks now, because it's pretty important to understand that the banks are melting. And it's not because of the money. We have inflation because they flooded the markets with money, right? Things were too liquid for too long. Plus, you had all the wealth concentration. But the banks are not in good shape. And this, they always knew was going to happen if interest rates started to go up because the debt got too high, things like that. Yeah. But here's another thing, too, with the banks. Listen to this. It says, when there's a fear in the air, banks start getting really tight with their money. And right now, there's a lot of fear in the air. A major credit contraction would be a nightmare scenario for this economy. And there's evidence that it's already starting to happen. Hopefully, our leaders can find a way to calm things down, because we all remember what happened during the last financial crisis. Banks decided to substantially tighten their lending standards, and that really deepened the economic downturn. So our leaders should be doing what they can to support the stability of the system. But in so many cases, they do the opposite. Just like we've said, Milton Friedman told you straight up, if this is the way you got to do it, if you want to be successful, don't buck individual rights and sovereignty, because humans have a way and a tendency, systems, which are human designed, processes, human designed, have a way to push back on that. And they do. So Wednesday, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen publicly admitted that blanket coverage of all uninsured deposits in U.S. banks is not under consideration. She said, in response to a direct question about whether Treasury would circumvent Congress to insure all deposits, she says, I have not considered or discussed anything having to do with blanket insurance or guarantees on all deposits. So when she made that statement, Michael says, she poured even more lighter fluid on small and mid-sized banks all over the country. Wealthy individuals and large companies have been already pulling billions of dollars out of such banks, and a lot more money will inevitably be pulled out in the days ahead. And why? These banks are bleeding deposits at an unprecedented rate. So what do you think their approach to lending is going to be? They're going to tighten up exactly what they're bleeding money. Why would they give out more? Yeah, that's great. Let's give out more.
You ain't getting that loan, buddy.
That's right. So in response to a tweet that Joe Biden touted the accomplishments of his administration, Elon Musk warned the banks are melting. And he's absolutely right. This is what he says. President Biden on 3 days ago says, "In my first year in office, we protected more land and waters than any president since John F. Kennedy. We've also made the largest investment to fight climate change ever. Today, we're building on that momentum by protecting additional natural wonders." And Elon says, the banks are melting. Yeah. And he's quite correct. And our banks are definitely in the process of melting, and hundreds of them could be in very serious jeopardy. And just to make sure that the hordes of banks will be soon teetering on the brink of disaster, the Federal Reserve just hiked the interest rates again, Scotty.
Oh, lovely.
So, yeah. So that's bad, right?
Mm.
Now, I want you to know that
How many times have they raised interest rates? Isn't this like the 9th or 10th time that they've done it?
That's you have to understand this. Prior to 2000, so from 2000 to the end of the Great Depression, average interest rate over that time span was about 7.5%. Okay? If we had to monetize our debt at 7.5%, that means as all of those treasuries that are floating out there mature, they get rolled over at whatever the interest rate is at the time they mature. And that 7.5%, it would literally take the entirety of the income tax just to pay the interest on the debt at 7.5%. That means that you would have to make. Let me back that up. That would mean that the government would have to make some really tough choices when it comes to what they're going to fund and what they're not going to fund, because their liquidity is going to dry up. And it's going to happen very soon. As a matter of fact, I see it drying up here this year because of just the makeup alone of Congress. So you're going to see a movement in that direction. You're certainly not going to see an appetite for the type of debt that's been run for as long as it's been run. So you're going to have tightening of some sort. Now, any tightening whatsoever is going to cause major, major trouble in the United States. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a lot because we become so dependent on it. Scotty, in your community, how much would you say government plays a role in funding at least a portion of the people's lives in your community? By like what percentage do you think that there's, people depend on the government, meaning like they either draw a benefit or they somehow, some way depend on the government to provide a service for life?
I would say it might probably be a little lower where I am compared to probably some other areas, but it's still probably a significant portion of people. I mean, I don't even.
What do you think, average for the country? What do you think? Out of how many? What do you think?
I don't know.
Receive some sort of service or benefit that they depend on to live from the government.
I don't know. That's a tough. I don't know. Maybe I might be lowballing this, but I'll probably say maybe 30%, something like that.
Yeah, I was gonna go like 33, maybe 1 in 3.
Yeah.
And I'll bet you we're lowballing. I'll bet you we're way lowballing. Yeah,
probably.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. We got about 2 minutes to break, and when we come back, we'll get into a little bit more. I want to finish this up. it appears that credit card transactions are tumbling. See, at Citi, as Citi's Paul Lejeune writes in the latest Citi's Credit Card Insights report, the bank's credit card data for the 16 subsectors it tracks shows that total spending in March week 3 decreased 10.3%, a big deceleration versus March week 2, and driven by high single-digit declines in transactions. Ex-food, spending decreased even more, tumbling by 13% versus 8.1%, minus 8.1% in March week 2. He says this was the first week of data following the disruption within the financial sector, and we were curious if it might impact the consumer. Well, it did. It was the biggest decline in total retail spending that they've seen since the pandemic began in April 2020. So economic activity is already starting to slow down. When we come back, we'll get into the rest of this, as well as how that affects commercial real estate, how that affects industry, and how it's affecting us and industry. So don't go away. Hour 1's done. Hour 2's on the way. We'll be right back after these messages.
Hey members, the new KGRA DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA DB.
Are you looking to go on a faraway journey that is magical and mysterious, reaping on mystical legends? If so, then Mysterious Adventure Tours is perfect for you. Imagine a voyage to explore ancient mysteries of Ireland, haunted majesties of Scotland, or their chilling Birth of the Vampires in Romania. These small, esoteric getaways are limited and do fill fast. So, go to MysteriousAdventureTours.com and book your trip soon.
It's not just a donation.
It's a warm blanket.
It's a bottle of clean water.
It's a roof and a bed.
It's knowing someone cares.
It's feeling safe.
It's a today that's better than yesterday.
Every dollar you can spare helps so much more than you can imagine. Please, donate now to help people affected by Hurricane Ian. Your support is urgently needed.
You're listening to the KGRA Digital Broadcasting Network. We provide unparalleled coverage of trending news in the world of ufology, cryptozoology, and paranormal phenomenon. Whether you're watching our video live stream or listening to one of our audio programs, you are getting the best from world-renowned researchers and hosts, guiding you through topics the mainstream won't touch. Miss one of your favorite programs? No problem. Head over to the members area at kgradb.com for access to our massive library of award-winning content. Make contact, stay connected, only at kgradb.com.
Yes, it's hour number 2, and we're back. And so we're talking about the doomsday type stuff right now. That their economy, that they're not doing so dang good there, Scotty. And you think not doing so good, man.
Them there banks ain't doing so good there, Joe.
No, sir. No, they're not. Yeah, they're melting. So says Elon Musk. That's right. It's hour number 2 of the Freedom Link. Scotty Lopez, Joe Joseph, and we're talking about how you've noticed how government intervention never actually works out in our benefit. As a matter of fact, it always makes matters worse. I've always asked people, and you can do the same thing. Go to your friends and say, hey, name one thing that the government has started for the benefit of the people and hasn't run into the ground. Go ahead. One. You won't. Because they do. So you heard about the credit card transactions and how they're seeing a big pullback, and rightfully so, because whenever you see bank turmoil, people get spooked, and that's good. They need to get spooked. People are now moving back into crypto. The rich are moving into bonds because bonds are actually paying more. You're getting more of a return now than you are in most stocks and everything else because everything's starting to tank. So people put their money into safe havens when they start to see that happen. Problem you have now is debt because of the Federal Reserve jacking interest rates because of inflation, because they flooded the market with money. So the more dollars you put out there, the more production that you have to have that goes along with that influx of money. Otherwise, you don't have enough stuff for the money. And when supply is low and demand is high, you have inflation. But you also have shenanigans. And shenanigans are when companies like Coca-Cola and your big box retailers go in the name of inflation and inflate it even more than it really needed to be, but they have the excuse, so they're going to do it anyway. And we've just seen that. We went through that cycle. But now people are pissed, and rightfully so, and broke because of that. And
there's another term for that, Joe. It's called price gouging.
That's price gouging, yes. Well, that's happening. People are broke. You have a cost of living crisis going on to the point now where squatting is becoming such a problem that it's making national headlines all over the country because you can't get rid of a squatter once they're in your house, right? It takes months and months to get rid of them. Heck, you may be a squatter one day because if you've seen the rent everywhere and the cost of real estate, it has to collapse. Now
you're gonna end up squatting in your own house.
Yeah, no doubt, dude. No doubt. But I want to bring this back to the 70s. In that time frame that we were listening Milton Friedman discuss. Back then, the average mortgage rate was about 15%.
Right.
Okay? When you bought a car, if you got 24% interest, that was good. You were rocking, man. Rocking. So that's something to understand is that you have high interest. You're taking out a large swath of your potential customers because they can't afford it. And so you didn't have prices going up in housing like you did when you had 2% interest and 3% interest because people could buy more house. Then they built more house. They didn't have enough more house. So prices shot up where the median house now costs $343,000, Scotty, which is nutso. How do people afford that? How do you do that? How?
Like I said, when the bank comes to take your house, just be like, "Hey, I'm a squatter." Maybe they'll let you stay.
Yeah, well, you got to have like some sort of proof of ownership or lease or something like that. But I mean, who can't make a, hey, ChatGPT, write me a lease real quick. Okay, there you go. See, I'm telling you, man, it's just going to get crazy. So you have that. Then you already been seeing the tsunami of layoffs in recent months. That's going to increase. Walmart just announced that they're going to axe hundreds of e-commerce fulfillment workers. 200 workers in Pedricktown, New Jersey, and hundreds in Fort Worth, Texas, Chino, California, Davenport, Florida, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, and many also getting their shifts reduced, an elimination of evening and weekend shifts. Accenture just announced that it's going to be laying off 19,000. And that's a professional services company. Disney, they're being forced to slim down, they say. In fact, Michael says, we're being told that the coming wave of Disney layoffs in April will be a bloodbath. April 3rd, shareholder meeting, a virtual affair this year, less than 2 weeks away. Some clarity is emerging about the company's plan to reduce staff and costs. Insiders tell Deadline that multiple rounds of cuts are being prepared. The first one is being targeted late March, likely next week, March 30th or 31st. According to sources, that will be a big wave in April, described as the big one or a bloodbath, when a large portion of the cuts are expected to come. So Disney's coming down the pipe.
Boy, can you imagine, being handed that pink slip by Mickey Mouse? I mean, that's horrible.
Right. That's bad. Or even like Pluto's probably going to have it in his mouth.
Right.
It's
but,
like,
I mean,
we haven't seen anything like 2008, though, Scotty. It hasn't been that bad, but it has it has all the makings of it and more.
All these companies are preparing, these companies are preparing, they're tightening up, these corporations are tightening up, and they're like you said, they're trying to hold on to what they got, and
well, I want to hit you there, because I think you hit on something very important, and it's an effect of the slowdown. However, because of diminishing returns, a lot of publicly traded companies have been doing what most would do, trying to find efficiencies, right? To be able to be more profitable. That way your bottom line is more robust. You have more return for your shareholders. Hence, you have more people that want to invest in your company, and your stock prices go up. And that's what you want. That's what you want when you're a publicly traded company, but it gets harder and harder and harder to do so. And so these companies get leaner and leaner and leaner, and sometimes it gets to the point where you get too lean. And it causes problems.
They start trimming the fat, and then all of a sudden, maybe they're cutting a little bit of the meat as well, and but here's and then here's another thing that also I would say is compounding this issue, right? So not only are they laying off, all these people, right, and tightening up and whatnot. On top of that, like you said, they want to run more efficient. They want to run. How many of these people that they're laying off do you think they're betting on? Well, hey, a lot of these AI systems are going to end up replacing these people.
Well, there is, however, there's a balance, right? Because you have automation, but you also have the cost of automation.
Right.
So some companies, depending on the states they're in, can take advantage of certain incentives through like their power companies and distribution companies will offer incentives or government grants, all sorts of different ways to be able to automate or make themselves more profitable through more efficient processes, which is good. That's a good thing, when you talk automation, though, I think we're still a ways off in certain arenas. Although some have really automated, like warehousing, for example, Scotty.
Well, and I'm even talking about like maybe a lot of these pencil pushers and number crunchers that a lot of these
very much so. ChatGPT.
A lot of these, right? And now you have these AI systems that can
Data
just go
centers.
go through your spreadsheets and just tell you everything, right? And so. I think a lot of those people that were in that sort of
we're in that time now. Okay, so like call centers, data centers, like reservations, things like that. anything like a service type data entry position, days are numbered. Days are numbered. No doubt about it. This also gets into the obsolescence of human labor. In 2016, I did a documentary with Aaron and Melissa Dykes called Obsolete. And if you haven't seen it, check it out. It's on Amazon Prime. You'll see it on YouTube too. But it goes over the obsolescence of human labor. And they've seen this coming for a while, but now we're actually like getting there. It seems like we'd never get there, but now we're starting to get there. Not in the more technical stuff. That's going to take some time. Technical type machining ops, things like that. Some of it can be automated. A lot of the new machines are unbelievable, but you still need a human to load it. You still need that kind of interface right now. The robotic technology is probably 5 to 10 years away, and that's not so much so that they don't know how to do it. It's to produce it. Industry and supply chains just aren't ready for this kind of change, but they're moving in that direction. The war in Ukraine really screwed that up and probably kicked that can down the road a little bit. But what I'm going to show you now happened yesterday, and it happened in Pennsylvania, and it happened at a very historic, well, not historic. They're historic because they make chocolate bunnies. That's why it's historic. But it does show you exactly why this is a big problem. When companies start to feel the pinch and they lay off their workers, they'll often do things to cut, like, for example, maintenance, like you see here. This is the R.M. Palmer Chocolate Factory. This was Building 2. There is no more Building 2. Building 2 is no more. It has disintegrated. The building across the street from Building 2 was pushed off its foundation 4 feet. And a lot of people say, well, how could that happen? How does that happen in the United States where you have all these safety regulations and things like that? Well, it happens because you can have all the regulations you want, but you have to have the resources to be able to maintain these things properly. What we're finding is in U.S. industry, there is a issue going on now because supply chain is so unreliable and inflation has caused such a challenge for a lot of these companies that either A, you can't get the parts, B, you're keeping machines in commission well past their end of life, well past when they're safe to operate. And then you end up having catastrophic failure. Or you go too lean and you start cutting corners where you shouldn't be cutting corners. I've seen places where you don't have the labor to do things. A common thing in industry is to have a very, very sound preventive maintenance program. But a preventive maintenance program is only as good as the corrective maintenance that gets done when the preventive identifies all that stuff. You see, when you do preventive maintenance, it's great to change the oil and grease the ball joints on your car, put your windshield wipers in. But when you're doing that stuff, when you're rotating your tires and you see that, oh man, I got 5,000 miles left on my brakes. Are you going to change the brakes now? No. You could, but you don't have time. So you schedule it.
And you're seeing this across all kinds of industries, you know, and I mean, boy, I'll tell you what.
Yep.
I would not want to be flying on an airplane right now because I'm sure a lot of the cost-cutting measures that is going on within the airline industry right now, maintenance and whatnot. Boy, I mean, we already have a lot of these issues with, planes almost hitting each other in midair, and a lot of the problems with just the archaic systems in place as far as, flight control systems and all of that. But maintenance and all of that, man, it just
Well, let me say this: as a guy that works in aerospace, I can tell you that the issue isn't so much like the industry that supports it, as much as the industry itself. And the industry itself is kind of in flux. It's in flux for a few reasons. Engines, right? Let's just take engines, for example. Engines rely heavily on critical alloys, right? Like, for example, you could use like an Inconel alloy or a wasp alloy or titanium. Let's take titanium. Titanium comes from Russia, right? Uh-oh. Yeah. Uh-oh. So that's a problem. Stainless steel, another very critical component in aerospace manufacturing and aircraft design and assembly. And stainless steel is a very, 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 very heavily Russian industry. As a matter of fact, it is exactly where it's Russian and Ukrainian. That area
right,
is very heavy.
A lot of steel comes from Ukraine. Right.
Nickel specifically. It's nickel. Nickel is one of the largest areas of nickel production was Mariupol. And when that steel factory went up and those people died inside of it, 90% of a lot of the nickel production in the world went kaput.
Yeah, I was about to say, people remember all those people that were held up in that factory, and that's where a lot of the production took place.
That's right. That's right.
Global production.
Yeah, and because of that, we're seeing issues with that kind of stuff. You're talking forgings taking an extremely long time to procure. Not anybody's fault. A machinist is only as good as the stuff that he has to work with. And if he doesn't have the stuff to work with, what good's the machinist? Well, then that's going to lead to, well, do we keep the machinist? Do we furlough the machinist? Right. Do we lay him off? What do we do? Because, see, these companies have a very, very hard, they're at a crossroads. At the same time this is going on, normally you aren't addressing a labor shortage at the same time. So when you have an economic downturn, normally you have an abundance of labor because you have more people looking for jobs. You have a higher unemployment rate, more availability of people that would apply, and you would get a better candidate. That's not happening anymore. The reason why it's not happening anymore is because of government subsidized labor. Or government subsidies, period. Think about Walmart. Think about a grocery store. Here in Connecticut, there's a grocery chain called ShopRite. They pay their clerks that stock shelves $19 an hour. $19 an hour to stock grocery shelves. Now, a lot of people say that's egregious. I don't think that anybody gets paid enough these days because of the greed of these large corporations. But more importantly, Scotty, the inflation.
I was about to say, you just factor in inflation.
You gotta keep up with it, right?
Right.
How do people afford anything if they can't make a living? So it's actually better for people to stay out of the workforce and collect unemployment or disability or whatever. YouTube, online, a lot of services have gone online.
You can't peg a salary at a flat rate all the while while inflation increases.
Right.
Because actually, if you do that, your salary is actually decreasing as the inflation increases, and
that's correct.
And you would, they need to factor in inflation and adjust salaries accordingly as it goes up. As inflation goes up, then salaries should go
here's
up.
the problem. Here's the problem.
But
when globalism became the thing of the day, right?
Right.
All of a sudden, United States labor has to compete against emerging economies.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not competitive. We're not competitive. So the problem that you have is American aerospace companies, right? They have to compete with companies that, unless you have a government contract, aren't bound to have their parts manufactured in the United States. Don't have to be. They could be made in Malaysia. They could be made in Timbuktu. It doesn't matter. They're not bound by that. It's not like a national security concern. So for an American aerospace company, they're trying to be competitive with these other companies, but they're at a great disadvantage. So yeah, you would think automate as much as you possibly can, because that's your only way to get there. Plus you have an absolute void of talent now. So here we are. Remember, we're at an economic downturn, and at the same time, you have a shortage of labor and skill. So these companies now are forced to hold on to their labor because now they've trained them. In aerospace, it's like 6 months to a year. Some of the areas or skills within aerospace take 2 to 3 years, sometimes 4 years to get a certification. Right? So you don't want to get rid of that. You just put all that time and effort into doing that. But now you're holding on to them, and they're not producing. They're not producing because you're not getting the orders. You're not getting the orders because you're competing against emerging economies. But you're also dealing with the fact that airlines aren't retiring their airplanes anymore, or not as much as they were. They're canceling orders left and right.
Right.
They're keeping the planes on the tarmac longer and in the air longer.
Like I said, I don't want to be flying on a plane because now they're keeping these older planes out there, and
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no telling, because you think about it. Airplanes are extremely safe relative to other modes of travel, only because they are so hyper regulated. But those airframes have a very finite life. Popeye and Rad Chick used to get into that all the time, especially on Freaky Friday. They come on a lot and talk about radiation and the effects that radiation at that height, when you're at 38,000 feet or whatever and you're flying, is a lot more intense and has a lot more of an effect on the aircraft and on the airframe, than
the higher up in the atmosphere you go, the less atmosphere there is there that is blocking the radiation from the sun. So yeah. And
so you're not going to fly, are you? You're not flying?
No, after
I don't like to fly anyway.
I was gonna say after the Grope Squad got introduced into the airport.
Then there's that too. You're right. Then there's all that. That's just and then more government. Because that's it. Remember, folks, government only has one tool in its toolbox, and that's a hammer, right? That's all they know. So all they can do is just wallop the shit out of you after something happens. And it's that way too in business. Somebody does something bad, we're going to take it away from everybody. It's always like that. Sucks. Well, another area that's of concern, and should be a concern. And Scotty, ChatGPT probably has a lot to do with this too, is the demise of the downtown office space, commercial real estate. According to Tom Citron of the Epoch Times, commercial real estate is facing a very, almost like a perfect storm, I guess. He says, in the mid-1970s, I was a struggling business and economy student. I paid for my tuition and personal expenses with physically demanding summer and part-time jobs and some student debt. I dreamed of one day working on Canada's version of Wall Street, which was located in Toronto at corner of Kings Bay and King and Bay Street. That day came true in 1980 when Dominion Bond Rating Service hired him as a junior analyst, and 4 of 5 big Canadian banks occupied the corner of King and Bay and their impressive skyscrapers. A block away were the Golden Towers of Canada's financial institution, the largest one, the Royal Bank of Canada. It says a book published in 1982 was named Towers of Gold, Feet of Clay, a reference to the fact that 2 RBC towers literally have a thin layer of gold coating their windows. Think about that. Remember the grandeur, Scotty, of
right.
of business, of like New York City, of like
the towering
Chicago.
Skyscrapers, the hustle and bustle,
the allure of it, right?
And just the businessman going to his office in a skyscraper, right?
And just how it was almost worshipped. Remember, there is the movie in the 80s that really showed the hero worship of that, in my humble opinion, was Michael J. Fox, The Secret of My Success. Anybody that wants to see a really shitty 80s movie, but you'll find it remotely entertaining only because of the hero worship of
right. And then what was that other movie? It had, I think, Dan Aykroyd in it, and he was like a stock guy or something like that.
No. It was it may have been. I can't remember if it was him. It's been so damn long.
But you saw a lot of those movies in the 80s that really romanticized that whole.
Oh yeah, totally.
The whole thing.
I mean, you see it even now. But normally now there's more of a doomsday spin on it, like Wolves of Wall Street and all that. Right. But this was back in the heyday when, man, it was cool as hell to be on Wall Street or in Chicago or that big city, the majesty of those beautiful skyscrapers and all that kind of stuff, right? So commercial real estate, fast forward now to 2023. 3 years after the onset of lockdowns, many offices remain half empty. The pre-2020 crowds who ate and shopped in the underground area beneath those towers are far smaller. In fact, before the lockdowns, the underground was overcrowded to the point of being an introvert's worst nightmare. The changes in Toronto's financial district mirror the story of most downtown cores across North America, if not the industrialized world. And it looks like the trend of people working from home is here to stay. I wouldn't even say that, because you do have people that are moving back to the office. The problem that you have, Scotty, though, is that they're being replaced. It's not that they're working from home. They're being replaced.
I was just saying, I think it's a combination. I think a lot of these businesses moved towards, remote work models, right? Where they, during the pandemic, they decided, you know what? This actually is working out for us. I mean, do we really need people to be coming in, And then they just kind of stuck with it. And then, like you said, I mean, there are people coming back, but a lot of these jobs,
they're being replaced.
They're being replaced. They also realize that, hey, there's a more efficient way of doing this, and it doesn't require a person being able to do this.
There's a positive and a negative. The big glaring positive for working from home is you're working at home.
Right.
Okay. But that's a glaring negative too, because I don't care what anybody says. You're not more productive at home. You're just not, unless you're a poor accountant that can't get, that keeps getting bothered constantly because of stupid meetings or people coming through your office and bothering you, and you can do things more at home, that's great. But that's typically not the way it works. Oftentimes at home, there's more distraction.
There's a lot of distraction at home.
More distraction. And people will end up doing laundry over doing what they're supposed to do. That kind of thing. Okay. But you don't have to pay people as high a wage. Why? Because a selling point of that is you don't have to drive back and forth to work. Now all of a sudden, if you're doing 100% remote or something like that, what do you need a car for? The one time or whatever you got to go to take the bus or an Uber or something. You don't have to have a car. Cars are a freaking money pit. So if you don't have to have a car, that's great. You don't have that personal property tax associated with that. You don't have the repairs. You don't have the car payment. You don't have the insurance, the gas, all the maintenance. It's none of that. So that's a huge thing. But the problem is those jobs that you could telework from, Scotty, are now being replaced by Chat GPT automation. And okay, but now what? Now what do we do? What do we do with an economy that's built on the idea of labor for money? What happens when labor's obsolete? What do we do?
It's a good question. See,
these are the things that you can't kick down the road anymore. The can's been kicked. We're here now. This is the problem. What do you do, Scotty? What would you do?
That's
being put on the spot. If you had to think about it right now, what would you do?
Well, you would obviously have to try to find a way of finding something for all of these displaced individuals to do, right? Like another something, a job that does require a human to do it.
No, you need the Oasis. The metaverse. Only maybe if we had a full body, that'd be great.
Maybe right. Got to work on that, Zuck. Got to work on those those Nintendo 64 graphics. They're not cutting it. But look. In all seriousness, though, I think this is why they're trying to push a lot of this metaverse stuff and everything like that, is because they want to start moving more towards this whole digital virtual economy sort of thing. And maybe they want people to start, I don't know, playing these roles in the metaverse where they're selling digital assets or performing a virtual job of some sort that they say is somehow productive, but is it really productive? What is it really what is it really contributing to society or anything like that? And that's the issue. So
it's not. So this is what you have to do, right? The first thing you have to do is you have to figure something out. Like, okay, we've automated all the farming, right, or whatever, or it's super cheap labor. So I think you're going to see more of that push into Brave New World 1984. Got to remember, too, you've got a huge population crisis on your hands. And I don't mean overpopulation. Okay? The whole idea, Georgia Guidestones, I truly believe the reason why it was blown up is because they knew. It's like, we did it. It's coming. It's here. We've done it. Wish fulfilled. It's going to be here within like 10 years. We're going to watch. You're going to have a population collapse of biblical proportions. Why? Well, if it's not food shortages or weather events or things like that you hear and see, and it's the boogeyman and blah, blah, blah. No, the real culprit is no one's having babies anymore. And an aging population. And we're not going to be able to support. Our population is screwed. My generation screwed. We're screwed. We're absolutely screwed.
And the control freaks that run this planet, right? I
Yeah.
mean, what do they refer to us as? Useless eaters,
Useless
right?
eaters. Yeah.
Useless eaters. And whenever
And they'll have their castles, Scotty, because they've built all their caves and castles and everything else and islands.
And whatever use we did provide to them as far as labor and building things up and doing all of this stuff, you know, in order to keep their keep their power structure, going, now that is obsolete. What do you do with those useless eaters? You know,
I don't know.
And
I don't know.
That's the scary question, and
That's a scary question. So what ends up happening to them? What happens to everybody? You know, do we end up eating cockroach bars? You know, like all the push to eat bugs and things like that, because you can't have cow farts, because cow farts make the earth warm and cause atmospheric rivers in California and tornadoes in Mississippi. So you can't have beef. These problems are one to ponder, but we got about 20 minutes left. I want to get into this tech stuff.
Cool.
Yeah, because why not? I see some Kev Baker mentions out there, and of course, in his vein, why not? So
this is definitely some Kev Baker vibes going on.
That's right.
Here
Some
with
vibe here.
Right.
Scientists open the door to manipulating quantum light. So says phys.org. This is pretty interesting. University of Sydney and University of Basel in Switzerland have demonstrated the ability to manipulate and identify small numbers of interacting photons, packets of light with high light energy with high correlation. It's unprecedented in its achievement and represents a landmark in the development of quantum technologies. Stimulated light emission, postulated by Einstein in 1916. That was the laser. That's what brought lasers to be. And it also stimulated emission has now been observed for single photons. Specifically, the scientists could measure the direct time delay between one photon and a pair of bound photons scattering off a single quantum dot, a type of artificially created atom. A type of artificially created atom. Holy schmoly. Yeah, this is instead of food, right? Instead of food, and the fact that our whole monetary system is collapsing because obsolescence of human labor. This is what we're going to figure out how to do: is how to put a quantum light, a photon of light on a synthetic atom, because.
Hey, priorities, Joe. We got
priorities.
Other things.
Right? Yeah. Now, the way the light interacts with matter continues to enthrall scientists. Of course, it does. Well, and the human imagination, both for its theoretical beauty and its okay. Now, what does this mean? So, one advantage of using light in communication through optic fibers is that packets of light energy, photons, do not easily interact with each other, and this creates distortion-free transfer. Which is why, like fiber optic cable, you can pass a lot of data over a fiber optic cable, vice over a copper line, because of that. Because
you don't get signal degradation or anything like that.
That's right. And it says light is used to measure small changes. LIGO, LIGO, I should say. Now, those are interferometers. Those interferometers, down in, I think it's New Orleans, Scotty, and up in Washington. Now, those were put in place specifically to see these kind of events. They put it in place, I think, because they wanted to see the transition. When did we cross the galactic plane or start to transit the galactic plane?
Didn't LIGO also, weren't they the ones that detected the gravitational wave, or they speculated it was Planet 9 or whatever?
That's right. That's absolutely right. But the reason those were built was because it would be the device that said, oh crap, our solar system has now entered that the galactic equator. Crap. Look, you could say what you want about gravity and everything else, folks. I have my thoughts on gravity. Kev did too. More so that gravity is, they sell it as bunk, and we live in an electric universe that is basically a sea of energy all around us. And it's electromagnetism that draws everything and things together, right? An electric universe. If you think about it as a simulation or a hologram, then that makes perfect sense, because just like on a TV screen, if you look at yourself as a pixel, right? What's all around you? A sea of energy, just and light and things, and it's like a plasma.
Right.
Right? So that's kind of what it is, right? In a nutshell. So the other thing is, they're so worried about putting a photon of light on an atom, but we could also harness this power. What did they say? It's like a cup of air. Like if you took a cup of air, it has more energy, could like power the entire planet for like 1,000 years or something like that. It's crazy. Just out of a cup. That's how much energy is all around us, and we don't harness it, but we have the ability to do so. Over in Norway, they have a 2 megawatt electrolyzer. And what they're doing over there, and what I'd love to see here in the United States, and this is something, folks, that could happen very simple. You take an electrolyzer, and that electrolyzer takes water and it turns it into hydrogen and oxygen through a process called electrolysis. You might have heard it in science class back when they taught science in science class. and so you have fuel now, basically rocket fuel. If you think about it, we put rockets into space with liquid oxygen and liquid hydrogen. It's one of the ways we can do that. But you can also fuel boilers. You can fuel turbines and all of that stuff with that. So you have solar panels. Solar panels create electricity. Electricity can then power a electrolyzer that would in turn separate your hydrogen and oxygen. That could then take your turbine, provide your hydrogen and oxygen at the right mixture to combust and spin your turbine, and you are now running a turbine and creating electricity with water and sunlight. It is absolutely easy to do, absolutely something that has been able to be done for a very long time, but something that does not run too well with the whole profit model and everything else when it comes to like your power companies and your gas companies, your fuel companies, all that kind of stuff kind of runs afoul of that. Anybody that's gone and tried to bring forth that technology has often ended up having their life destroyed and or they were taken out.
It's always
right?
that particular way of powering things. The whole water thing.
And that's just one way, right? That's just thinking of physical stuff. But then you have guys like T. Henry Murray, who in the 1910s and 20s, by the way, he was the one, the actual true inventor of the transistor was T. Henry Murray. He built a box. And that box could create and generate 50,000 watts out of thin air. Out of thin air. I'm going to pull up the story of T. Henry Murray real quick, just so you can understand how unbelievably powerful the government can be, or people that don't want this stuff to get out. Could be corporation. Right.
That are threatened by this disruptive technology, you know.
That's right. So we'll this is just one of many. Now, of course, Tom Bearden, who just passed away, I think like a year ago, not even a year ago. He was so big into free energy. And so Bill St. Clair actually went and mirrored his site so it didn't go away. So all that knowledge is still there. In the early 1900s, Dr. T. Henry Murray of Salt Lake City produced his first device to tap energy from the metafrequency oscillations of empty space itself. Eventually, Murray was able to produce a free energy device weighing 60 pounds and producing 50,000 watts of electricity for several hours. Ironically, although he demonstrated his device repeatedly to scientists and engineers, Murray was unable to obtain the funding to develop the device further into a usable power station that would furnish electric power on a mass scale. As a boy, Murray had been deeply inspired by Nikola Tesla. His imagination was especially fired by Tesla's claim to have knowledge of an energy source greater than ordinary electricity, and by Tesla's emphasis of frequencies as the stuff of the universe.
Yeah, well, go figure. The dude that was inspired by Tesla ended up doing some Tesla stuff, you know?
Yeah, like right here, there's a picture right here. This is the Murray radiant energy device. This is him powering 100-watt lamps, 35 of them, and a 1,200-watt iron with no input cable at all. None. And you got to remember, at that time, batteries, they weren't as good as they are today. Let's just put it that way. Shortly thereafter.
Yeah, and they were gigantic and bulky, so you would have seen if he was trying to do something funny with a battery.
That's right. Yeah. So he went to school, and then he produced his first elementary device that delivered measurable electrical power. And he continued to work diligently on energy devices until he steadily improved it, particularly his detector tube. The only real secret of the device, according to Murray himself in his book, The Sea of Energy in Which the Earth Floats, which you can buy today. Murray presents documented evidence that he first invented the first transistor-type valve in 1925, far ahead of the officially recognized discovery of the transistor. In his free energy detector tube, Murray apparently used inside the tube itself a variation of this transistor idea, a small round pellet of a mixture of triboluminescent zinc, a semiconductor material, and a radioactive or fissile material. His patent application, for which a patent had never been granted, was filed on July 13th, 1931, long before the advent of Bell Laboratories transistor. So he tested it out. Long story short, John Murray, his son, had gone on every year since Dr. Murray's death in 1974 to patent his machine. But because it has a cold cathode tube, or it's like a cold cathode process, the patent office won't do it. It says here, the U.S. Patent Office refused to grant Murray a patent, first because his device used a cold cathode in the tubes. The patent examiner asserted it was common knowledge that a heated cathode was necessary to obtain electrons. And second, because he failed to identify the source of the energy. It came from nowhere. It doesn't have a plug.
Who the hell do the patent office think they are to be the arbiters of dude, that is so stupid, you know,
but I think that's just interesting and something that people need to understand. Like this is, let me pull this up here just so people could see. That was right before his death. That's him and his sons. That's him, his son, and then A.J. McDonald. That's his lab right there where he was doing his work. And that's an antenna. He actually ended up doing some energy transmission work, much like Tesla. This is him working on his machine in the late 30s. So pretty interesting stuff, you know. But just goes to show you that it doesn't matter at all what your intentions are or how much good you want to do in the world or, whatever. If it's a good idea, if it doesn't make money, if you can't put a meter on it and all that stuff, you got no chance. Even now, right? Solar panels. You know how toxic it is to make these solar panels, let alone dispose of them, right? Yeah, sun, green, yay. But we have the way to pull energy from the vacuum. What the hell do we care about that? I mean, it's great, but you want to talk about green? Come on.
It's very interesting, right? Because you talked about the electric universe, and then you have Murray over there writing a book called, the Earth's floating in a sea of energy.
The Earth floats, something like that. It's absolutely right. Absolutely right. And it's true. We float in a sea of energy. We're surrounded in it. So why don't we put our efforts into doing something that, because money can't be the driver of society, this is why I'm saying this. If money can't be the driver of society, you have to drive money out. How do you do it? Well, the first thing you have to do is you have to make it so that the cost, whether it be labor or materials, not necessarily money, but you want to make it so that as little cost is necessary. So if you have a perpetual power supply, that helps make things a lot easier, because now you don't have to worry about people buying power. You could put one of those in an automobile. Don't have to buy gas. Just makes it go. You got a 50 kW power supply or whatever. Whee! See you later. Right? I mean, this is not hard. Like Mr. Fusion and Back to the Future. Well, you don't even need banana peels. That's what I'm saying. It's just, we are there. And whether we like it or not, we're going wherever that is. But I'm not very, very, very confident in the people that know what's best for everybody else. Hence the reason why I wanted to take a little walk in history tonight and show why it's so important that we always consider the fact that we don't know what's best for anyone else but ourselves. And to truly get out of this crisis, that's coming. That's here now, but you may not feel it, but it's coming. Some people may, a lot of people do. You have to humble yourself and you have to work together, because if we don't, we're screwed. And 500 million people, those Georgia Guidestones are going to be more truth than they are fiction. I'll tell you that. Yeah. Terrible. Any closing thoughts there, Scotto?
No, I think it was a excellent trip down a history lesson with with his name, Friedman, and
Milton, Uncle Milton.
Uncle Milton,
Dr. Friedman. Yeah,
schooling everybody from back in the day, and his words are even more relevant now. I would say.
Yep.
So
that's true. And don't forget, I'd say Popeye would be on next, but I don't think Popeye's coming on, because Popeye says, you know what? I'm not coming on. So I think he's not coming on. But we're all done, and it was fun. So we'll be back next week. This is Scotty and Joe saying, Auf Wiedersehen. Sayonara. Have a great week. Take care, everybody.
Adios.